Girl, you the best. And she love me when I'm in it. And she never be pretending. Nothing is real. She gon' tell you what she bought it. Cause she know you can't afford it. Know you can get it. Looking exquisite. No competition. Stay on the pivot. Who be watching? They be plotting. She's so motherfucking independent.
So excited for everyone to meet my new friend, Kamelia Britton, all the way from Texas, to share some great tips, because she is the creator of Hackerette, which she's going to have to explain a little bit more about this hacking thing. So Kamelia, thank you so much for being my guest today. I am so excited to learn all about your travel influencing and how it's changed. So tell us how you got started. And thanks again for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. So I grew up in Texas. I'm originally from Texas. I now live in San Diego since 2005. And so when I was growing up, I never traveled as a kid. We were pretty poor, and, just travel was not on the radar whatsoever. And so when I put myself through school and became a nurse, I just was really ready to open up my horizons into doing the things I couldn't really afford to do, when I was young. And so my first kind of travel was me moving out to California, which was again in 2005. And I took a 3-month job as a travel nurse, and then realized I wanted to stay in San Diego and not be a travel nurse, but be a nurse and then go travel. That was kind of like what's the thing. So then I saved up for a bit and I was working. And in 2006, I took a big, international trip to Europe for a couple weeks. And that was really my first big trip. I didn't even get on a plane until I was 18 years old, which is kind of crazy now. So I've now been to, I think, 36 countries, but yeah. So anyways,
So wait, I gotta hear your first international travel. What was that like? I mean, if you took your first trip at 18, and then did you travel alone? Did you travel with friends? Set the scene. What was that like? Definitely. That first time? That's a big deal.
Yeah. When I was 18, actually, went with some friends to Mexico. It was my first flight ever. And I had a great time, but I was terrified with the plane. I was freaking out about the landing and everything, and really having a panic attack because I'd never done it. And I was already 18, so I didn't grow up with that, So, and then, I didn't really do a whole lot else of traveling until, again, I was, 26 or something back in 2006. Well, I was 25. And then I went to Europe I went to Italy and France for a couple weeks with some girlfriends, and spent a couple weeks there, and just was really soaking up all the differences. I loved the diversity. I loved the variety. I loved that they were doing things differently. I loved that it just felt really different and new. And it was kind of like, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know. And there's life going on here in a whole other way that I'd never could have imagined because you haven't ever experienced it. And so I just thought, well, what's over there and what's over there? And I just knew that there was so much more I wanted to explore. And so, I came home from that trip after a couple weeks. And because I was so new, I spent way too much money on so many mistakes and, all the things you do. I overpaid on so many things. And I came home and I thought, gosh, that was so fun, but it was so expensive. And how can I do this on a budget as like a single, young person with a decent job? I was a nurse. And so, of course, like I said, I went to Google and asked what any 25-year-old would ask at the time and said, how can I travel the world for free? And of course, Google answered and showed me and introduced me to the wonderful world of travel hacking. And so I started, so travel hacking is where you use credit cards and you accrue points and miles that you can then spend on flights and hotels. And so I learned how to play the travel hacking game where you would sign up for the card, you would meet a minimum spend, say it was $2,000 or $3,000 in 3 months or something like that. And they would give you a big sign-on bonus of like 50,000 miles or something like that. So if 50,000 miles will pretty much get you either 2 domestic trips in the USA or 1 international trip. And so for me, I thought it's a no-brainer. And so I thought if I just play the game right, and have a strategy and go in with this with a strategy, then I'll win the game. But if I don't go in with a strategy and I go in just, spending the money and not paying it off every month and all that kind of stuff, then they win the game. So I saw how it was set up. And so I thought, this is too easy. And so I started opening up, credit cards and doing it very strategically. I would do one and then get the points, and then I would do another one. And people think it might ruin your credit, but it doesn't. As long as you're, being responsible and going in again with a strategy, you can really rack up all this free travel if you play your cards right. And so for me, I just found this like a game. And so I started traveling all over, essentially for free. You would use the points and miles with a little bit of fee or taxes or whatever. But I mean, I was going everywhere for, on these points and miles. And then I also discovered something called error fares, which are like mistakes. So those are glitches in the system where, between the algorithms and the currency changes and the dates and the times and everything's moving. So as with any algorithm, glitches can happen, right? And everything's moving all the time, every day. And so when a mistake shows up, you can get a crazy deal for like nothing. And so I one day found a around the world trip for $325. And it was New York, Milan, Prague, Paris, and Bangkok for $325. And even one of those would have been more than that. So I jumped on it. I grabbed it. I bought two, and I was terrified thinking it wasn't going to work. I was going to get arrested at the airport, like all this. And so I went on the trip kind of really nervous and had everything planned, took off work, and I did it. I ended up taking a 6-week trip around the world. And then again, I went back and I learned how to find more of these mistake fares. So then I ended up building a course on how to do that and started my blog and started teaching people because everyone was asking me, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do this? And I thought, I'm just going to build a course because I'm tired of telling it. It's a little involved, obviously, right? It's not a 5-minute answer. So I built a course and yes, exactly.
Kind of need to know.
And so, that was back in 2016 when I started my blog and my course and everything. Things have changed a little bit then, but a lot of things are still the same too. So I don't think they're as common as they used to be, but they are still happening, and there are ways you can set yourself up for that.
So when you started doing all these different trips and even with your blog, what was some of the attractions to where you would decide to go travel? Was it just where you get the best trips with the most benefits, or were you motivated by location and culture and just discovering places that maybe you dreamed about or thought about as a teenager?
Yeah, for a long time, I followed the glitch fairs because I was single, I was young, and I would travel by myself. And so I had it set up to where I could get alerts on my phone when they were happening, because when they happen, you have to buy them within moments. You don't have time to think about it, check your schedule. You just have to buy it, check it briefly, and go. You have moments, really. And so, I would literally, set these alerts, and then it would be like, LA to Amsterdam for, I think it was like $197 or something like that. And I was like, done, and I would just buy it like that. And so that would be where I would go if that place sounded interesting to me. And most places do sound interesting to me because I want to go everywhere. But most places, if it sounded like, that was kind of on my list, or, my like loose list of that's always growing. And then I would just buy it and I would go, and I would literally follow the error fares, and I would just take off work after. And they would a lot of times be plenty of time in advance where you could do that. And so that's kind of how I traveled for a really long time. And then whenever I became a travel blogger, it became a little bit more strategic, with work and projects and campaigns and things like that. But for a long time, I would just jet off for 10 days with a carry-on only. Those days have changed because I have to bring gear and outfit changes and all that. But at the time, I would go, 6 weeks around the world with a little carry-on and have the time of my life and do some couch surfing and just all kind of things. It was fun.
Now, I'm curious. So, what were any of the pitfalls, or was there any vacations that you took? You're like, oh yeah, never going to this place again, or it looks better on the pictures, or anything like that. How do you handle those types of situations, or any warning signs, red flags for people that might be looking online?
Definitely. I always love every place. They're also unique. And so there are places that are harder than others, depending on your travel style. Like I will say, and I still love them, but they're sort of like advanced traveler. I wouldn't send a beginner traveler there. And one of those places is Tokyo, because there's really not a lot of English being spoken, and their language is and like designs, the Japanese. And so it's like
Right.
not like there's any possible way for you to translate that except for with Google Translate on your phone or something like that. And so there's just not a lot of English spoken, and we sort of take that for granted when we travel most places. And so you really have to have a data plan on your phone. You've got to have Google Maps accessible anywhere to get anywhere, even with the cab driver and everything. They do have Uber. It's wildly expensive. It was like $200 for 30 minutes. It's just not the normal what we know. So everyone uses public transport, and you've got to know where you're going on public transport. And it's a gigantic grid of hundreds of, grids. And so you've got to have,
And you can
you
end up
can
in a
end up
different country.
all over. Yes. And so, like I said, it was an adventure and I loved it and I would totally go back, but I would just warn anybody who is, new to travel, maybe get some travels under your belt before you go to Japan, because it's not as just easy as most countries where everything is very tourist centric and things like that. And Brazil's another place. So they don't really speak very much English, and some places aren't safe and some places are fine, but you don't know that as someone who's coming in. So I went there with a friend, and I was thankful that I did, because I wasn't really comfortable going off by myself too much. And because I wasn't sure what the good neighborhoods were and what the not so good. And also just the language barrier is really hard. And if I don't speak Portuguese, then that's it. So yeah, but I would totally go back to them. It's just knowing those are more advanced countries and not for the beginner traveler.
Oh, fantastic. Now, so when you were on your 6 weeks travel around the world, and you mentioned couch
Mhm.
surfing, are there any tips that you can suggest as far as getting lodging as well? I mean, you mentioned the hacking for travel. Was there a
Mhm.
hacking for hotels as well, or
Yeah, absolutely.
how was
So a
that?
couple of things. You can basically use those points and miles for airfare, or you can use them for hotels. Or you can basically, I don't really do couch surfing anymore. I've done it a couple of times. That's where there's an app called Couch Surfing, and you can stay with people for free, and they just kind of like to meet people and stuff like that. And as a woman, to keep it safe, I would stay only with other women and things like that. I only did that a couple of times. But for the most part, if you are wanting to save money, I would typically do an Airbnb. And of course, then you're going to be able to, if you stay a bit longer, you can negotiate a lower rate and stuff like that. And you really can't do that with a hotel. If you stay longer, you just stay longer. So it just depends on your travel style and how long you're going to be. If you're going to be somewhere for more than 3 days, it probably makes sense to look at getting an Airbnb, and that way you can kind of get your own breakfast. You're not having to go out for every single meal every single time. It's kind of nice to have your coffee and a smoothie or something at the house, you know what I mean? So there's little ways you can save money, but the more you take on the local culture, such as public transport, or such as, the slower you move, or the more you really embrace the local culture and live like a local, whether that's an Airbnb, public transport, then you're going to save more money. But the faster you move and the more you live like a tourist, the bill's going to go up. Mhm.
Okay, that's great information. Now, I wonder, because you do this as a profession, as an
Mhm.
influencer, how does what was the biggest change from traveling as a tourist and now doing it as a
Uh,
job? And like you mentioned, having to carry your gear and be more strategic in campaigns. What are some of those tips you would give for maybe a first time influencer? Because right now, a lot of people are stuck home, and some people aren't stuck home, but are, able to maneuver around.
Mhm.
But for those of us who are getting ready to come back out into the world
Yeah.
and can't wait to travel and find all the great places to stay, and maybe even venture into the world of influencing,
Mhm.
teach us some great tips. And because you also teach a class, so kind of give
Yeah.
us an idea of what they can expect from attending your classes as well. So a little sneak
Yeah,
peek.
yeah. Yeah, so first question to answer how it's changed. I mean, I definitely used to travel so light and would just have a little carry on, and I was free and I would go. And now I definitely have my camera, my drone, different lenses, different outfit changes, hats, dresses, all the things. So now I have this huge embarrassing bag that, I feel just like, oh my gosh, people are probably looking at me like she's here for a weekend and it's just this gigantic bag, but you just never know what you're going to need. And you need it when you need it. Right. So I just rather overpack than underpack. And, So yeah, that's changed for sure. And then you're working, so you're up at 5 a.m. to catch the sunrise because that's the best lighting. And when no one is crowding the pool, there aren't hundreds of people doing whatever you're shooting. Right. And so,
I like
yeah, so
go on into your time.
exactly. So
Or catching you on, I love watching, it's on Instagram, influencers in the wild, where they'll catch people working.
yeah,
Sometimes you're like, oh, that's how they set up that shot. So I like watching it for that
yeah,
reason. But
yeah,
yeah, you don't want
definitely.
to get caught
Definitely.
by that as well. So 5 o'clock in the morning, got
Yeah,
it.
definitely. It's so much more work than it looks like. And I'm very, very big on showing behind the scenes and how much work goes into it. It looks like we just float around in infinity pools all day and, drink champagne, but nothing could be farther. We work very hard. It's like
Right.
those shots don't just come out like that. You have to edit them, Photoshop people out and crop and edit. And, it's a lot of strategic things. And then just lighting is everything. Someone sitting there in your shot, you can't ask them to move. They've paid to be there. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, so you just get up early, you do that. And then there's a lot of things they usually have planned for you. They have, on any press trip, they've packed your schedule. They usually give you 3 days to do 18 different things, and you've got to shoot it all, story it all, and you know what I mean, drip it out, have posts on the feed, engage, all these kind of things. So we're really working the whole time from like sun up to sundown. It's pretty exhausting, honestly. I mean, it's great and amazing, but it can be definitely like go, go, go. So you really have to take care of yourself. And I see a lot of creators get burnout because it is a lot, and you really have to focus on self-care. You really have to focus because this is a marathon and not a race. And you're totally going to burn out if you're not, really putting really good, self-care measures in place. It's just so easy to burn out. I see it all the time. So, and of course, in my class. So that's part of moving into that. It's part of something that I really have as a core part of my coaching. And it's, we start out with passion, and, you've got to have a passion or it's just not going to fly. You're just going to get sick of it, right? You really have to have a true passion for whatever it is that we're creating with you. And it's got to be connected with a purpose, because if it's not just outside of like, I want a bunch of followers and I want to get paid, right? There has to be something deeper, or that's also going to not fly. It's not going to work, right? Because success without purpose becomes empty eventually, right? It may be a couple years, maybe whatever, but it will become empty eventually. So we have to have that component as well. And then we move into proficiency, like how the heck do we do the thing? How do we post it like this? How do we hashtag, and all the things. And then of course, profit. Yes, exactly. The algorithm and the whole thing. And then we move into profit, right? Like, okay, right, we've got our foundation. We understand we're flowing and going. How are we going to profit from this? So we're going to weave in different ways to profit. And everyone has a beautifully unique way that they would enjoy profiting. There's so many ways you can do it, right? So I love finding those ways that we can create together, and then really honing in on that and supporting you to profit from the things that you love. And then we move into prosperity, right? We have to have self-care. We have to set yourself up for ways to do this for the long term. This is a marathon, not a race. We don't want you to burn out. We have to get you on a posting schedule that you can keep for the next 10 years. We have to keep you filled up and all this kind of thing. So it's all connected. You can't have one without the other. Trust me. Been doing this since 2016, and I've learned a lot, and I've seen people burn out. I've seen people do things that are a good idea, but they weren't passionate, and they get, they quit, all the things. So it's all connected. And yes, it's all connected in the program.
Yeah, no. So I know in the acting community, it's some of the big red flags are an agency that wants you to pay up front, or meeting at hotels. Like, there's different red flags. What are some of the red flags that you would notice as far as, because I mean, taking that trip or taking that risk to go cross country or even cross state lines or an hour maybe out of your way can be a dangerous thing as a woman. And especially with the idea that you're learning a lot about that culture once you get there. So what are some of the big red flags maybe people should look out for before making that travel, whether it's a culture red flag or monetization or where they might be staying?
Yeah, for culturally, I mean, definitely research, what's going on there. If you know people there, ask them, and I'm a little more adventurous than most myself. But typically, if a brand is, sending you there, they're going to keep you pretty safe. Typically, they usually have someone come and get you, and they have everything planned, and you're pretty much with the group the whole time. But if you're traveling alone, not with a press trip, then yeah, you just have to use your own judgment and do your research and just really trust your street smarts of like feeling safe and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like things have changed a lot now. And yeah, so it's just kind of using your street smarts. But on a press trip, you should be pretty safe because they're very much there to take care of you, and you're going to be with them the whole time because they have plenty of stuff for you to do.
Absolutely. So now with being an influencer, what are some of the things you would say would be some of the things that are red flags even for maybe doing business with someone? Making sure you get a deposit first. Like how do you work those things out just so you can feel safe and knowing that you can trust the trip? Because certain brands, of course, you work with like global brands that people know, but at first I'm sure you had to take the Airbnbs or new companies or maybe smaller brands that
typically smaller brands are not in travel. They're not hosting press trips typically. The people that are hosting press trips are global chains like the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, stuff like that. And so the really small brands, they don't really have the budget to be flying out a bunch of influencers and stuff like that. So you don't really have to worry so much about that. But as far as like the influencers,
like a group of you that goes at the same
time. Typically, some press trips are just around you and some press trips are around a group. It depends on what the campaign is. But if you're getting invited, these brands typically have budget. So it's typically not smaller brands.
Just making sure, because I'm like, because even with modeling, when you travel to do different runway shows, and you don't always get paid to do it because you're working for such a big brand. It's just getting the notoriety to work with that brand and knowing that you'll have 1,000 cameras on you as opposed to maybe 3 cameras on you if you're working with a smaller brand, but they'll pay you more because they need bodies in their wardrobe and so on. So I was curious how different it is on the influencer side. So that's neat that you guys can kind of travel as a group. So there's safety in numbers as well. And
yes, definitely
being able to negotiate together or find out, hey, what by the way, or work as a network, I guess, as well. So what are some of the other things that I guess would have been the most exciting or fun perks of being an influencer that since you've been doing it for so long, like you've seen it change, and now with COVID, how has it changed for you? Even with that, like, are you still working? Like, how's that changed your industry for you? I'm assuming it had to be a huge change when everything was closed down. But
so many things. Yeah, so many things. So I've worked with a lot of lifestyle brands as well, and also travel. And I would say, to answer your first question, the most exciting thing I think I've done, I actually got invited to the Maldives for a press trip, which was just a dream come true. I mean, like literally that was my bucket list place. And I literally got invited to go there for free. So it was amazing. And, I flew in and they had everything planned for us. And it was definitely a dream. It was the most beautiful place. It's probably my favorite place in the world out of 36 countries. It's probably my favorite place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it just felt like a dream. It was definitely a dream come true professionally and personally. And just like, I did that, right? I got invited to come here. What a beautiful thing I've created that someone wants me to come here. You know what I mean? I just was like,
how did you win that trip as well? Like,
so
that's kind of feel special to know you won it as well, depending on, I guess, how you
won it. I was just networking. I was going to lots of conferences back when we could have conferences. And I was going to lots of travel conferences and blogger conferences and things like that. And I would just make connections. And they usually have tables set up for brands who want to connect with bloggers and influencers. And I connected with them and, we kind of chatted at the table. And then a few months later, they reached out to me and said, we have a trip and we want you to come. And I was just like, oh. So yeah, it was pretty amazing. And I was so grateful.
Yes. See, I didn't know if it was like an awarded trip, a nominated trip. I was like, well, wait, let me find out the story first. Well, that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's nice. Just chatting up the right person and getting a trip out of it.
Yeah, putting your face out there, connecting with people, just real human conversation and things like that. And then, of course, to answer your second question, how has it changed? So it's very much drastically changed. in March of 2020, obviously was when here in California, we went into lockdown, and a lot of brands, like I said, I work with lifestyle brands and travel brands and things like that. And so a lot of the brands, their budgets went down drastically. I would say, gosh, I don't even know, by a lot of them by 80% or something. It was just crazy. And yeah, so they were scared to spend, and their budgets just went down, and then they were very choosy on who they were going to be working with, and the offers got so low. It just was like, oh, and so, and, travel was pretty much shut down, and then hotels didn't really want to promote at the time. And then they haven't really had budget, obviously, too, because of everything that's happening. And so I'm starting to see now, here we are, what are we, January 2021. And, I have sort of through 2020, I have, pivoted more into coaching. For one, I love it. I love being able to empower other people to do what I've already done and teach them the ways and everything. And also, just because we were just in so much lockdown and everything. And so I wasn't able to go so much and everything. And so now the hotels are offering comps, and free stays and things like that when available, when they're ready to promote. There hasn't been any paid campaigns that I've seen myself personally in the travel space. The brands are paying for sure for lifestyle brands and things like that, wellness and things like that. And so the budgets seem to be still have lowered. I don't know if they're as low as they have been, but they still seem lower than normal, at least in my space. Like I work with, and I used to manage myself for a few years, and then I signed on with a talent agency a couple years ago. And so they've been managing me ever since. And I've just sort of like organically, I'm still with them, but I've just sort of organically done less campaigns as an influencer myself and done a lot more coaching, teaching people how I've done it. And that just, in this point in my life, it's what brings me the most joy. So I've just kind of leaned into that.
Wow. So, um, like I'm trying to unpack so many different questions I had while you were saying all of that. Like part of me is like, okay, so
Mhm.
what are some of your top places other
Mhm.
than Maldives as well? And then like domestically as
Mhm.
well as um abroad. Yeah,
Mhm.
we'll start there because then that might unpack the
Okay,
other ones
yeah.
from that. 'Cause I was just like, ooh, where else
Oh,
do you like
yeah.
to
I like it
go?
all, to be honest. I mean, I usually veer towards
Yeah.
beachy tropical because I'm from Texas, so I like the heat and I'd rather be cold. I'd rather be hot than cold. Yeah, but I did have a
Same.
great time. I did get invited to Tahoe with the Ritz-Carlton, and we went skiing and stuff like that. And that was a blast. It's not normally what I would choose, but they invited me, so I came, and it was great. So that was super fun for a change to mix it up. But yeah, usually you can find me on a beach somewhere with an infinity pool or something like that. That's kind of my favorite type of vacation, really anywhere. I don't care where I go. I just want to be able to be warm and barefoot.
Room service. Well, I guess depending on the budget,
Yeah.
room service as well. I am always joking with my family. It's not a vacation if I still have to clean the
Yeah, definitely.
house.
Don't get an Airbnb.
If I have to do the dishes, it's not a vacation
Right, right.
to
Definitely.
some extent. So anyway, but now I'm curious for the coaching side of it.
Mhm.
Like when you're speaking for yourself, it's one thing, but when like during the summer and a lot of different things were happening. There was like a lot of different changes and narratives, and people were talking about social justice
Mhm.
issues, and it became one
Mhm.
of those things where it was expected to be. I mean, you saw it on social media, you saw the black squares, you saw different things like people kind of breaking brand, so to speak, and
Mhm.
actually speaking political or
Mhm.
um, how did you with your classes or students, how do you tell them how to navigate that? Because that is one
Mhm.
of those issues where
Yeah.
maybe you're scared of losing accounts, but at the same time, maybe I'll find accounts that align more with
Mhm.
my brand or so on. So how do
Mhm.
you negotiate that or navigate that?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question because that has come up so many multiple times over the course, I mean, of the past year. I think I ran 5 group coaching groups last year. And it was like there was something happening every, you know what I mean? It was like, the pandemic, and then it was, the Black Lives Matter, and it was then, now it's the Capitol, and just all these things have been happening, and it's all just been very heavy. And just how do you respond? Right. And they would ask me, how are you responding? And I was just like, you have to come from your heart. Number one, right? You have got to come from your heart and what's true for you. Right. And like, it doesn't matter if you lose followers, you lose followers. You have to be always authentic and real. Right. And so if you speak from the heart, no matter if you say the wrong thing or if you are awkward or whatever, if you truly speak from the heart, I think people feel that. And I think they appreciate that. Right. And so that's what I just was telling them. It's like, you know what, take your time, take your space, figure out how you want to come through. But honestly, just coming through from a place of authenticity and true like introspection of like, I'm here and I care, then that's really the best thing I think you could do.
Right. And then how do you also explain to them how to pivot, like in the sense of 1 minute you're maybe you're speaking out with social justice issues or animal rights or whatever it may be, and then going back to travel vlogging or cooking or like without appearing tone deaf or being able to, I guess, still interweave that in so it doesn't just seem like because that's a big thing from but I'm seeing people say it just seems like people were pretending to be involved in certain social justice issues or animal rights issues or vegan or whatever it may be. Like they're just following certain trends just to make sure they get the likes and the follows, but it's not genuine. And like you said, follow your heart, but then making sure that you're keeping it consistent so that it doesn't come across as being just a trend that you were trying to follow for 1 day or 2 days or, it was a monthly, you know what I mean? So just even with that, like, how do you make sure that they stay, I guess, in the fight? So once you make that decision, it's not looked at as just a hashtag that you were taking advantage of.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you truly do speak from your heart, people can tell. I think that authenticity shines through. And when our people are faking it, people know too, right? I think we all know. And so I think when you are coming from that place, you're sharing organically as it is for you. And then at some point we do have to pivot and we have to go back to promoting our businesses so we stay alive, right? So we stay afloat. And so I just talked about that. I literally said that on my feed and stories, like we have to run our businesses. We've been in lockdown since March 20th, who knows how long any of this is going to go on. Right. And so we do speak about it. We do talk about it, but we also say, we can do both, right? There's plenty of time and space to do both as long as you're doing it really authentically and you're not faking it. You can tell, like I said, you can tell who's faking it and who's, doing it for performance and who's like genuinely like, wow, this is not okay. You know what I mean? And so I think as long as you're, again, just being authentic to you and coming from authenticity and truth and speaking your truth and just being able to try to communicate that in the best way that you know how, I think people just appreciate that. Even if they disagree or whatever, I feel like,
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure even with, since you are a breast cancer survivor, which I also wanted to speak about that because you were brave enough to share that on Instagram. And I wonder what for you was that choice to even share with that. But sometimes in October, because my mom's a breast cancer survivor, it becomes like everybody think pink. It's my favorite color. So I kind of love it at the same time. But it's also like, okay, we get it. You got the pink ribbon. You're pretending. It's that same maybe performative feeling maybe that you feel now that you're a survivor. Like, be careful how, I guess, balancing that out and making sure that. But at the same time, like, how did you feel coming out about that, or just even not knowing how you were going to outcome? Because thankfully 2020 was a good year for you that you were announced to be in remission in that sense. But so share more about
Oh gosh, I could go on about that all day. It was such a trauma, I think. So in July 2019, literally I was on top of the world. I was traveling all over the world. I worked so hard to go from nurse to influencer. And then I did it. And I was like, everything was here, just got engaged to the love of my life. Like my life was like, perfect. I did it. You know what I mean? I worked my butt off to get there, but I did it. And so then all of a sudden, cancer comes along and that wasn't part of the 5-year plan, right? And so, but it doesn't matter. It's all of a sudden like, this is the only thing that matters. It went from like not even a figment of my imagination that could ever fathom to this is all that matters because you have to stay alive. And, that was such a trauma and just like stopped me in my tracks. And when I got diagnosed, I was just in complete shock. I was only 38 and I was so incredibly healthy. I was just like, how did this happen? And the kind that I had, they don't know the cause. So many breast cancers are hormonal and we totally know the cause. That's 90% of breast cancers. The triple negative breast cancer, which is the kind that I was diagnosed with, they don't have any idea of what the root cause was. So no one could tell me what I did wrong or what happened or whatever. They were just like, it's a cell mutation and bad luck as far as we know. We don't know. So it was very difficult to be like, where did I go wrong and all this? And it was just a challenge to also to speak out about it. I hid my diagnosis for 6 weeks because I like needed time, my own time and space to come to terms with what was just laid on me. And because triple negative is so much less understood because they don't know the root. So it's difficult to treat. And there are less treatments because they don't know what caused it in the first place. So chemo is like the only thing that we know, not other drugs and things like that. And so it was like, it tends to be very fatal. And so I was contending with all of this and I was like, how do I even go about this? And, do I hide it and wear a wig for a year? I tried on every possible scenario in my mind and played it forward. And at the end of the day, it was bursting just to come out. And I had to let it out. It was literally like painful to keep it in. But at the same time, every time I would tell someone, I only told like 5 or 10 people that were super close to me. And every time I would tell someone, it was re-traumatizing me, having to go through telling it. And then they would cry. And then I'm like comforting them. And I'm like, I can't do this. I've got to take care of me, but I have to tell them. So it was very difficult. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just post it globally. So I posted it on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, like everywhere globally. So all my friends knew, like every single person in my world, whether online acquaintance or close friend, they all knew. And I just like ripped the Band-Aid off kind of thing. And that was the best for me. So I could just deal with it all in one day because it was just too much to do it, to just drip it out one by one by one. And so, I did it that day. I had just had a surgery to go freeze my eggs because I had to do that before chemo. And I just laid in bed and recovered and responded to all the comments. And I just said, I'm doing this today. And that's that. And I did have people, it was weird. I did have people unfollow me. I did have people, and then some people ran to my side and go, oh my God, what can we do for you as a community? You know what I mean? And then some people unfollowed. It was a crazy time, and it was very confusing. And I just thought, and it was kind of hurtful. Like I didn't rob a bank, like I got cancer and I don't even know what caused it. You know what I mean? So I don't even know what I did or if I did anything. So it was just really painful to kind of see that. But the people that stayed were just so tremendously loyal and they were just, whatever, because I was a travel and lifestyle influencer and then all of a sudden I couldn't travel and that's what they were following me around. I was showing them everywhere and all these things. And then I basically was like, I can't travel for a year because I have to get, 16 rounds of chemo and 20 rounds of radiation and multiple surgeries. It's going to be a minute, before I can travel again. And like, sorry, but this is my life for a bit, And so and I was just always wondering, okay, so how can I provide value to my audience in a whole new way? I'm always thinking, how can I do this? So, I'm sure like a 10th percentage may have had cancer or something like that, but that wasn't even but so I just started sharing, insights that I would learn about resilience and, wellness and whatever else I was gaining from the experience. And sometimes like, here's where to get the best wig for the little small percent of people that are going to go through this, or the women who are unknowingly going to come after me. Right. And so I started blogging about it and all that kind of stuff. And I felt like, well, it's no coincidence probably that I have a large platform when this happened. So maybe it's my mountain to show others that it can be moved. Right. And maybe I'm here to speak out about this because I'm strong enough to do it. And I can do it with strength and positivity and realness, and also find the value, whatever that may be, whether it's, again, resilience, inspiration, not giving up, and also owning that it's hard, and owning that we can do hard things and we're tougher than we think. And you can't just allow yourself to stay stuck. You have to keep going. So.
And you also had the medical background of being able to explain what you were going through in a way that maybe the average person wouldn't understand so much, but could now understand it more and just, oh, that's what that means. Or just why you would have to do the different things or the different wellnesses and self-care as well. Just speaking from authority figure, like how it can affect your body and build and stress. And even with just coming out with your secret of what you were going through, like realizing that was causing so much trauma and telling people over and over again. So it's just, let me just do this all at once. So I don't have to keep answering the same question over and over again and comforting them when I'm the one going through it. So I get it. And everybody going through with the pandemic and so on. I'm curious now, with everything that you've learned from traveling as a nurse and as an influencer, what would be some of your key takeaways that you would like to share about resilience or even with self-care? Because the weekend's coming. There's always a good excuse to take better care of yourself or take that time out and avoid burnout,
Oh my
especially
gosh.
with you being in the medical
Yeah.
all the essential workers right now.
Oh, I know. Oh gosh, I appreciate them right now. I don't know what I would do if I was still a nurse right now. It's crazy, but yeah, I think they're both really connected. So, I mean, resilience and self-care, they're definitely intertwined. You've got to take care of you, before you can take care of anybody else. And for me, again, like I talked about creator burnout, right? And I was probably on like getting there myself, right? Because I was, quit my nursing job and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to work so hard so I can continue to replace that income. And I was so scary. I'm like, I quit my nursing job, which is like a noble career for like Instagram and traveling. And it just didn't feel logical, right? And so I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to sustain it because there's just no guarantees on anything, anytime you work for yourself, right? And so I was just working, 3 times as hard to make sure that I could continue to replace that income every month. And I was living in kind of fear a little bit, and so I was just like, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to work harder. And there's no problem with working harder, but you've got to do self-care. And I know that I wasn't. And then when I got diagnosed, who knows if it's connected? We'll never know. But at the same time, it was a hard stop. It was like, you know what? You haven't been taking care of yourself and now you're being forced to. And now it is a non-negotiable. I literally do not start my day until 10 or 11. I work out, I have my smoothie, I go for a walk with my dog, I do some meditation, I make sure like I'm good. You know what I mean? I look at my vision for what I want to create in my life, and then I'm ready to give to everybody else, right? And so if you're going to be resilient, you've got to fill your cup. You've got to factor in and work it in, whatever that looks like for you. If you have to get up earlier or whatever, start your day later, work it out, because you honestly cannot be resilient when you're like, you know what I mean? You're putting out fires and you're just constantly go, go, go. It doesn't work. And so, and then another, tip for resilience or whatever you want to call it, insight, is that, challenges, whether it's cancer, whether it's leaving your nursing job or whatever that is, challenges are opportunities for growth if you choose to see it that way. And you can literally, look at whatever challenge it is, as big or as small or whatever, it's an opportunity for growth. And when you can take a step back and look at that and see the value and where is this pushing me to change something? Where am I looking with awareness at my life and open to seeing things maybe differently, right? And you can't really do that from a place of depletion. You've got to, so it's all connected.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I don't want to deplete your time and all of this wonderful information you've been sharing with us, and definitely don't want to burn you out because you shared some amazing information. And I feel like I need to hurry up and take notes and like redo everything. But just as a quick takeaway, what would be your 5 things you would want to make sure that you would leave the audience with? And I want to make sure that everyone knows where to follow you at. Which I don't know why they wouldn't know where to follow you at, because you have thousands of hundreds of thousands of followers, and how they can find out more about your classes.
Yeah,
that you offer
definitely.
as
So
well.
gosh, 5 things. I'll just at the top of my head. I guess the first one would have to be, once again, self-care is not a nice to have. It is a non-negotiable. Make sure you're doing that. Next thing would be follow what lights you up. Don't do things because it's a good idea. Do what really excites you. Follow the fun. The third thing, just like give, right? Give, right? Like I love that book called The Go-Giver, and like doing business with, instead of a taker mentality, but like how can you serve? How can you give? Like giving first. And then it just becomes so much more easier, whether, you're providing value on a blog or you're in your business, or you're, just give first, and then it will come to you so much easier, because then you're not in like a taker energy, you're in like a give, and it's just karma. It comes back and you receive, right? And then I guess the other one, like allow yourself to receive, whether it's a compliment, whether it's, something. I think we block our own abundance so many times when we brush off compliments, we brush off this, and we're literally telling the universe that we don't want that. We don't want that. Right. And so we need to receive, and we need to lovingly receive so that we can continue to give. And let's see, the fifth thing, get into nature, go ground yourself. I love to lay in the backyard and just lay on the grass, and it honestly, when I'm having a stressful day, I'll literally just go grounding. It sounds very hippy dippy, but it totally works. And literally just 10 or 15 minutes connecting with the earth, you will just feel so much more energized and at peace. And do a little meditation if you're there. And I guess those would be my 5 things just off the top of my head. And then, thank you. And then for how to find me, I'm on Instagram at Kamelia Britton, Kamelia.Britton. It's right there. You can see. And same with my website. You can type in CameliaBritton.com, or you can type in Hackerette.com. As a giver, I give, everybody a free strategy call with me if you'd like to talk about
something eSpot exclusive.
Yeah, definitely. So I would love to, anyone who wants to connect with me, we could just send me a message on my website or on Instagram, and I would love to connect with you, and we can totally hop on a free Zoom call to chat about your business, whether that's, a business, or if you want to like talk about getting into the influencer world, the mindset that it takes to run a business successfully, to put yourself out there. There's a lot of fear of visibility. There's all kind of things. So send me a message. I do mindset coaching, I do business coaching, Instagram coaching, all the things. So it's all connected, and I would love to chat with you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that great exclusive. So all they have to do is say eSpot, or how will you know? What if everybody starts texting?
Oh yeah, eSpot. Yeah, mention eSpot. Mention eSpot. No, yeah.
Oh my God, this could get around. No, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for all of this great information. I'm gonna take advantage of this eSpot exclusive myself, because I've learned so much from you. Just even with the hacking of traveling, because as a family of 3 and being stuck home since March. Yes. I want to see everywhere that everybody else has been posting. And like, even when I was like looking through your Instagram, I'm like, like salivating at the pictures and just thinking even how you come up with your branding and color scheme. And there's a lot to it. Make sure you follow, find out more information, and let's do this. Let's find some new ways to make money. There are multiple streams of income.
Yes.